Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversation with Master. Today we have with us Brenda. She's a founder and director, if I understand right, for the Awakening Group. Brenda, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome and good evening. Hi.
Good
I'm
evening, good morning.
good morning. Hello to everyone. So yeah.
Depends where we are in the world at this
Yes.
point of the day.
Yes. I'm in Australia but work worldwide, as you know. Um in family constellations in many different forms actually. I created lots of new techniques using constellation work. So many structural constellations. So yeah, maybe we get to talk about that today. So we'll see.
I hope so. I'm very happy you take the time to be here with us today. And I would like to leave you more space to introduce yourself in the way that feels most authentic to you.
So, as you said, I'm the founding director of the Awakening Group, which is a organization that trains holistic counselors. So, we're the first organization in Australia that uses family constellation as a counseling tool. As when we train our therapists, I offer training in family constellations. Dr. Jane Peterson and I created a course together, and we were probably the first people who did podcasts and webinars way back in 2016. So we've been doing this for a while, interviewing masters to get family constellations out into the world more. So that was pretty exciting. And I create new techniques with family constellations. I work with healing sexual abuse trauma from a systemic point of view, and the missing key in terms of balance of giving and taking, which is the difference between someone having nightmares for 40 years and it stops within 15 minutes and they no longer have nightmares. I've been a facilitator for over 20 years and I'm still marvel at this work. I've created new techniques with polyvagal theory and Richard Schwartz's internal family systems therapy with structural constellations on working with your dual control model of sexuality. I've created techniques on polyvagal theory to uncouple what's in your nervous system that's not yours and presented that worldwide. So there's quite a few things that I've sort of pioneered, and I'm still marveling at the things that we can do with family constellations. I conduct constellations here and online and combine it with plasticine and so on. So yeah, it's
So
infinite.
you find the Awakening Group in '93, say many years ago. How was your vision evolving over the past 30 years about systemic work?
I think really where it happened was, as a therapist, people would come back with the same issue over and over again. And I was like, there's something missing here. And then I heard about family constellations through friends, and I started to begin to just introduce it as a visualization. And then I trained with a number of people, and then trained with, Gunther Weber and Bertolt Alsamer and Jakob Snyder and Goni Baxter and Stefan Hasna and so on and so on, the masters as such. And it was the missing piece for me, where, clients would come in. Like I had a client who would come in. She's been in psych care for 12 years. She's self-harmed her arms, her belly, her legs. And it was a compulsion. And so she came and saw me. They booked her out of psych care for the day. And when we sat and did a geniogram, because I already know she's done 12 years of therapy to try and fix it. So, normal therapy is not going to work. So, it's a systemic issue. And so when we did a geniogram, you could see up in her geniogram that her grandfather was wrapped up in barbed wire and drowned by the Nazis. And if you look at her body, it's so self-harmed, it looked like it had been wrapped up in barbed wire. So we did a visualization to honor the grandfather, to give him a proper burial, and she stopped self-harming, straight away. So, the impact of family constellations is so big. It's that missing piece, where clients come back over and over again with the same issue, and it's a systemic issue.
Yes, I hear about some colleagues do the same thing, because maybe they coming in proximity to some coaches or people who work in a holistic, way. They think, okay, I fix my problem today here with this person, so after I will be beautiful and amazing, and my life will be easy. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like this.
No.
And they have this frustration to live the same pattern. So today, actually, I release another book what I wrote, Think Systemic. What I work and what I like to work and to have more focus, it's more systemic coaching. So we go up from all this system what we are part of. And with this book, actually, what I wrote about it was we can't change people, right? Because we can change what they are part of. So when we understand this at this kind of level, we look in different way, and all this frustration what we have, because many people, maybe what they listen to this podcast, they think, hey, okay, if I make this, I will have these results and everything will change. But if you don't look from upside down exactly where you are and the reality in the proximity what you are and all this system what we are part of, because at the family system level, it's a tiny, you are just there in the family system, and you can work for years there. Right?
Yeah.
But you are in a company, you are in a society, you are in a country, you are little everywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're very loyal to that system. We're a symptom bearer of that system. No matter, we're more like trees and all the connections, that trees have than our current definition of a human being. We're bound by the system, we're strengthened by the system, but we're also weakened by the systems.
Now we shift a little bit, Brenda, in holistic work, your area, right? So what makes a good holistic worker? What is the qualities?
I think that whole analogy of the tree, if you like, is a good place to start. A tree is never by itself. It's never a solo entity. Yeah. And in the same way, we aren't, we're affected by the environment, whether it's the global situation or whether it's our current environment and the people around us. We're affected by our system. What happened to our ancestors, our upbringing, our parents' capabilities or capacities, as to whether we can grow or we're limited by that. Yeah. And what the system needs. We're affected by, the physical body in terms of, what it was given. We're talking epigenetics. We're also talking, chemicals, food, the nourishment. We're affected by thoughts. And whose thoughts are they? Whose thoughts are they? Are they ours? Are they systemic? Are they global? We're affected by our emotional body and so on. And so there's this whole need to really look at a person from a holistic point of view. Like what is being told through their being, through their symptoms, through their expression, emotionally, or their thoughts, or their body. It could be an illness. Whose story is that? Yeah, because our body is the family story. Our emotions can be the family story. Our thinking can be the family story. And it also can be a global story too right now. So,
It's very interesting you pick up the body. It's our family story. And I would like to ask you, maybe you can or I can learn something new from you. Many people, they have problems with some, kilos. So they have maybe 2, 3, 5 kilos too much.
mhm.
Or they eat too much, or they, I don't know, you name it. So we can pick up from family, do you think, some patterns that we start to eat too much, or we don't have really control in eating? Because eating too, it's a culture in
Yes.
some way.
But it also can be regulating one's nervous system. So, if you look at it from that point of view, you start going into, um, you know, m- the client's nervous system, and that nervous system is embedded in a bigger nervous system, okay, which is the family nervous system. And so you can also look at, well, that from that perspective, you can look at attachment styles. And so is the person an external regulator? So, more of ambivalent anxious, say, for instance. So if that's the case, we can then see that there's trauma up in the family system. If they're more avoidant and very much look after their appearance and their body and, more self, auto-regulating, yeah, so they're avoidant and anxious, then you'll more see loss in the family system. So again, whose nervous system is my body? And this is where I developed a new technique where we look at the polyvagal theory, the ventral vagal, sympathetic, and parasympathetic dorsal vagal, and look at what's entangled in each part of that nervous system. Yeah. And whose nervous system is it? And, is my anxiety mine, or is it my mother's, or is it my grandmother's? Yeah. Is it also that I can't go further than my loyalty to my family? So I'd rather suffer and maybe be overweight, yeah, than to be different and possibly be excluded or be criticized for my difference. So is it a loyalty? Yeah.
Because what I notice, what I think, I'm not expert about this, and we can look from different point of view. But many people who work in family constellation, they have, 2, 3 kilos more than normal people.
Yeah.
So what I think, when they work with all these family systems and all this, because they work with many clients, right?
Mm,
Many of them. So
mhm.
maybe they can take from these people some streamings, I call that in some way.
Yeah, I think that's where we really look at pain bodies. Yeah. As in, often as a therapist, we're very somatic empaths. And so we filter another person's pain body through our body, right? And if we're not very good at metabolizing pain bodies very quickly, we don't look after our body in terms of exercise, sleep, water, diet, meditative practices, then I think it gets stuck. We have these pain bodies that get stuck. And there's a beautiful process called non-personal awareness that Joel Young created that is very simple, and it says, this anxiety, say for instance, or this irritation, whatever's happening in the body, yeah, or this patterning, whatever the pattern is not personal. This pure energy of this anxiety is not personal, and yet I'm willing to experience it. And in that way, and I've seen it, it's kind of like a constellation in itself. It leaves the body. It's like who you really are and what's attached to you, those funny little pain bodies that may not actually belong to you detach themselves. And so
I notice the people who are healed in some way, they work with them many years. When you go close to some person, they have awareness. You feel them.
Yeah.
They are grounded.
Yeah.
And they are skinny. They are skinny, very nice, very beautiful, right? So yeah, I see some connection there, with this overeating, because sometime after some constellation, what I notice and what I say is coming this feel of hungry, right? Or
yes.
or yeah, so it's like, hey, now I must to eat.
Yes.
So it's a lot of energy involved there in the field. I guess I
Yeah.
don't have any answers, but I'm in the process to learn, I guess.
Even Muji, who's enlightened, speaks of this. When he's around a lot of people, he eats a lot, yeah? And I think because in family constellations, you're walking into people's, personal fields, pain bodies, the family pain body, because you're inviting that in too. And I think the analogy of being able to walk into someone's living room, yeah, and then walk out and close the door behind you as a visitor, I'm invited into that person's kitchen or living room or, whatever they invite you into to do a family constellation is lovely, but to walk out and close the door afterwards, and leave the pain body there. Because we have to collide into those pain bodies to get the information. It's like standing beside someone. Okay, this is what's happening, yeah? So we have to be able to be more fluid, I remember there was a cranial osteopath who gave me a technique of creating a glass house, with all the windows open, so that when I worked, the things just moved through, yeah? And that non-attachment, like really knowing who you are so that those bodies that are not yours simply move through, yeah? But taking enough time, resting, diet, all of that is really important. Being in nature,
It's part, of course, of the life. So, Brenda, if the listeners, they would like to come in contact with you, what is the best channel for you?
Probably the website, awakening.com.au. And there's lots of courses and articles and a way to contact me as well.
Now I would like to ask you an insight from all these 30 plus years of experience. What distinguishes a mature practitioner for a beginner?
What to do? I think the book Love's Hidden Symmetry by Bert Hellinger is a really good start. Yeah. I think also just joining workshops so you're becoming familiar. Do your own work. Yeah. I think at least 3 weekends is a good start before you even go into train, and really understanding trauma. We've broken constellations down. Facilitators know why they're doing what they're doing when they're doing it. So being able to read faces and read bodies, yeah, read the breath, because the breathing levels indicate permission. And they indicate permission from the family system too. So we call it blip. Breathing levels indicate permission. So if I ask a question and the client says, the client stops breathing, so I'm wondering if we could set up your grandfather, say, for instance, and the client stops breathing, that's a no. And it's a no from the family system too, because your body is the family story. So being able to read bodies and faces, be able to understand attachment styles. So on the chair, so you can regulate clients very easily. In fact, I'm presenting a webinar in the World Constellation Day on that. It also accesses information as to whether there's loss or trauma in the family system as well. Really understanding trauma and bonding, that's, to be able to regulate clients in the chair, because when they see something on the floor, say, for instance, I've seen clients go into dorsal vagal collapses or, sympathetic arousal, fight and flight. So really being able to understand and spot trauma and be able to regulate clients very, very quickly. Yeah, so they're not embarrassed by their reaction, but they also stay in that comfort zone. Understanding language and sentences, yeah, how to unpack a sentence, how to what a systemic sentence feels like. It's a bit like Velcro, yeah. It's like, oh, that kind of pulls me. And really understanding systems, how to work with systems, and moving from a client focused to system focused, and that means at times we won't do a constellation. Yeah, because the system is not strong enough to hold the change. So we might just resource the person or resource the system. Yeah, I think that's really important when we go, walking into someone's living room and go, oh, okay, we're going to change this and this. It's like, well, can the system hold this? Yeah. And this is where we really have to be humble in constellation work. Yeah. And understanding bodies and space, what each movement in a constellation means. Yeah, how do they look at each other? Being able to understand those towards and away movements, and eye movements. Looking down or looking or staring away. What might they mean? And that takes a lot of time, and what nations and constellations being explained and unpacked in terms of systemic principles. So where I get my first year students to start is understand the systemic principles. Find them everywhere, belonging, social order, equilibrium, understand conscience in the different forms, and really look at fate as well. I mean, you understand that, you can see it everywhere in every system, which is, it just opens up. It's like, oh, well, that's the behavior in relationship to belonging or social order or, equilibrium. So that's where I would suggest people start.
Many insights with you and a lot to learn, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
So now I would like to shift a little bit because you have many years of experience, and I would like you to ask you about the legacy. So what legacy do you hope the Awakening Group will carry in the future?
Well, it carries it now, actually, in that a lot of students, I've trained senior lecturers, I've trained King Courts judges, I've trained lawyers, I've trained social workers, psychologists, and so on. And really having that already rippling out in the community. I've trained school teachers and, they bring constellation into the classroom. I've got students at the moment who are teachers whose students are immigrants and refugees. So, Brenda, how do we, work with that and their nervous system and that trauma but also honoring their family, yeah, and their faith too. So it's, really honoring the more of us and having those skills ripple out into so many parts of the community, yeah. And lawyers, I know there's, I think it's Brazil recommends that couple do a constellation before they get divorced. So, it'd be great to see that. Because there's a lot of, systemic influences that interfere in our relationship, It's like, whose life are we living? Our parents. And how well did they do their relationships? Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think many different colleagues around the globe, they introduce in some way how much they want the systemic work, and that's fantastic.
And I think one of the key things for me, because one of the specialties that and a modality that I created was healing sexual abuse trauma. And that's so big. And it's more and more is being revealed. Yeah. And I won't go into, that on that scale, but it's being able to heal that systemic abuse trauma so they're not owned by it, and really understanding the concept of giving back the burden, but also taking back the parts that the client left of themselves there, and it's a game changer in terms of working with sexual abuse trauma, because a lot of people are trying to metabolize a trauma or a burden that's not even theirs, and they'll do that for 30, 40 years and still been trying to metabolize it, And I had a client who was abused at 10. For 40 years. She was 50. For 40 years, every single night she had nightmares. And just a simple process of giving back the burden to the perpetrator and taking back what she left of herself with the perpetrator, and end of nightmares. And so I think for me, that's a legacy I really like to pass on, is really that very quick way of relieving a burden, in regards to abuse, any kind of abuse, really, where, there's been a perpetrator-victim dynamic. So,
Yes, we have all the life in the front of us to work with us and integrate everyone what we must integrate in some way.
Yeah.
Now, another big question what I have for everyone who enjoy the podcast. If you have a message for the world, what will be?
Oh, interesting right now in the whole cultural and worldwide dynamics, that we all live in systems, and we're, we have to make peace with our systems, that we are connected to, whether it's our lineage, whether it's our community, whether it's our own body, our own internal system. And I think when we stop the war inside, and the war with our system, then the bigger wars stop. So to be humble and understand that we are all part of a system. We're never independent. And in that, we're also supported by the system. So there's less loneliness. There's an understanding I'm part of that consciousness, and I'm supported by that consciousness too, and also we're untouched by anything that has happened to us too, in terms of the truth of who we are, but more like understanding the humbleness of a tree, we're part of a system, we rely on each other, and to be able to honor the systems and reach out, but also offer, and this beautiful balance of giving and taking in our systems, whether it's our community, whether it's our relationships, whether it's, the relationship with ourselves, that to make peace with our systems that we're connected to, I think is, the greatest gift we can give to the world right now.
Yes, I see sometimes people they speak on different society, give and take to have some balance. Even in the workplace, they speak sometimes about that. And I don't know how much they know about the systemic work, or maybe they know but they don't speak about because it's taboo in some country. But of course, it's quite taboo, this topic, and it's little hocus pocus, like in Germany for 25 years ago was little bit like this. But slowly we even this podcast is a little bit a voice of this field, if you want, and I do with pleasure. And in the evening, I stay down with all of you guys from different part of the world and speak with you about systemic work and this what I have interest to, of course, in some way.
Yeah.
The last question, and I hope I don't tire you with all my questions. So, how can a personal growth influence professional performance?
It depends on your idea of personal growth. Yeah. Because a lot of personal growth is very independent. I work on myself. Okay. Which, when we work on ourselves, we work on our personality, and we work on our trauma and our ways of communicating and connecting and so on, which is very valuable in any workplace, any community, any organization. So we're not passing on that trauma, okay? I would say also personal development needs to be able to work from a systemic point of view. It's like I can work on myself independently, but it still doesn't deal with the system that I'm weakened by, but also strengthened by, okay? And this is where we really need to take that phenomenological approach and look at, personal development from a systemic point of view. It's like, okay, what am I a symptom bearer of in the family system that I keep playing out in my relationships or my work or my relationship with money or my health or, every part of our life it influences. So I think this concept of personal development needs to move from that, I'm just going to work on my stuff, to more systemic too. It's end to end. And how it then relates to our professional life is that we start freeing up that flow of energy, if you like. The flow of support from our ancestors, the flow of energy. So we become more available to opportunities, more available in our energetic bodies to manifest certain things, to, find relationships that are more conducive to who we are, if you like, rather than repeating a pattern over and over again. Jobs that we're more confident in because we have more support and we're not feeling as though we're isolated in that flow of love and support through the system and connected to, the community around us is more solidified, okay? So I don't think personal development can be separated from systemic work in that sense, because I've seen many people who've tried, creating their own companies. One example I have is an American guy who tried creating businesses over and over again, and each one failed. And when you looked up in his family system, his grandfather owned slaves in America. So, he was honoring the slaves in the failure and the cost that slavery had. His success was at their expense. So there was this deep loyalty, to what that cost the slaves. So, it's really important to be able to look at our personal development from a much more holistic point of view, rather than using our will as such, all the time.
Brenda, thank you very much for tonight and all the golden nuggets what you share with us. And I hope I see you soon around the globe or maybe to one of your workshops.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and good luck with all this beautiful work that you're doing. Thank you.
My name is Marius and thank you for listening.